You can be doing everything right and still feel lonely. You can be working on yourself. You can be healing. You can be making better choices. You can be setting boundaries and somehow still feel like something is missing. And that feeling right there can really mess with you if you don't understand it. I want to talk about this in a real way because this is something I had to sit with myself. This is something I had to be honest about because on paper, everything looked like it was going in the right direction, but internally, something still felt off. And I know I am not the only one who has felt that. You start doing the work, you start growing, you start becoming more aware, and instead of feeling more connected, you start feeling more alone. And that feels backwards because you would think doing the right things would bring you closer to people. You would think it would make everything feel better, but sometimes it does the opposite first. For me, this started showing up when I really began changing how I moved. I stopped overgiving. I stopped forcing connections. I started setting boundaries. I started being more intentional about who I allowed in my space. And at first, that felt empowering. It felt like I was finally choosing myself. It felt like I was finally getting it right. But then came the quiet. Less people, less conversations, less distractions. And in that space, loneliness showed up. And I had to ask myself something real. Why do I feel lonely when I am actually doing better? And the answer was not what I expected. It was not that something was wrong. It was that something was changing. And that change created space. And that space felt unfamiliar. Because before, I was used to being surrounded by people, even if those connections were not fully aligned, even if they were inconsistent, even if they drained me, there was still something there. And now that I was moving differently, that space was gone, and I had not replaced it yet. So what I was really feeling was the gap between who I used to be and who I am becoming. And that gap feels lonely because you are no longer who you were, but you are not fully surrounded by what aligns with who you are now. And that in-between space is real. Another thing I had to realize is that not everyone is going to grow at the same pace as you. So as you start changing, as you start becoming more aware, as you start setting boundaries, some people naturally fall off. Not always in a dramatic way. Sometimes it is subtle, less communication, less connection, less alignment, and that creates distance. And even if it is necessary, even if it is healthy, it still feels like a loss. And that contributes to the loneliness because now your circle is smaller, but your awareness is higher, and that combination can feel isolating. Another thing that plays into this is how you start seeing things differently. You start noticing patterns. You start noticing energy. You start noticing what feels forced. And once you see that, you cannot go back to not seeing it. So even when you are around people, it can still feel lonely because you are not connecting the same way anymore. You are not settling into conversations that don't feel real. You are not engaging the same way you used to. And that creates a different kind of distance. And I had to be honest with myself about something. Just because I am around people does not mean I feel connected. And that is a different kind of loneliness. It is not about being alone. It is about not feeling seen. And that is something a lot of people experience but do not talk about. So I had to shift how I looked at loneliness. I stopped seeing it as something negative, and I started seeing it as a signal that I was in a transition, a signal that I was outgrowing certain spaces, a signal that I was creating room for something more aligned. And that changed everything. Because now I was not trying to escape the feeling, I was trying to understand it. And understanding it made it easier to sit with. I also had to take accountability for something. Because even though I was doing the work, there were still moments where I would isolate in an unhealthy way, where I would pull back too much, where I would avoid connection altogether. And that was not growth, that was protection. And there is a difference. So I had to find balance. I had to learn how to be open without overextending. I had to learn how to connect without losing myself. I had to learn how to sit in my own space without feeling like something was missing. And that is a process that does not happen overnight. Another thing I realized is that when you are doing the work, your standards change. You want deeper conversations, you want more intentional connections, you want something that actually feels real. And not everyone is in that space, so your options feel limited, and that can feel frustrating. Because it is not that you don't want connection, it is that you want the right kind of connection, and that takes time. So the loneliness you feel is not because you are doing something wrong, it is because you are no longer willing to accept what is not right. And that is a powerful place to be, even if it does not feel like it, because you are choosing alignment over comfort. And that choice comes with a period of adjustment. And that adjustment can feel lonely, but it is also necessary, because what you are making space for requires that shift. So instead of rushing to fill that space, instead of lowering your standards, instead of going back to what felt familiar but not aligned, sit with it, learn from it, understand what it is showing you. Because this phase is not permanent. It is a transition, and transitions are uncomfortable, but they are also where growth happens. And I had to remind myself of that. I had to remind myself that just because I feel lonely does not mean I am alone. It just means I am in a different space, a space that is preparing me for something different, something more aligned, something that matches who I am becoming, and that is worth it. So if you are feeling lonely right now, even though you are doing everything right, do not rush to fix it. Do not assume something is wrong with you. Just pause and ask yourself, what is this space trying to show me? What am I outgrowing? What am I making room for? And trust that the right connections will meet you where you are, not where you used to be. And that makes all the difference. And something else I had to really be honest with myself about was this. Just because I'm doing better does not mean I'm automatically surrounded by better. That part right there is hard to accept, because you think once you level up, everything around you is supposed to match that. But real life does not work like that. Sometimes you grow faster than your environment. Sometimes you become more aware before the people around you do. And that creates distance, not because you're trying to separate, but because you're no longer aligned the same way. And that misalignment can feel like loneliness, even when you're doing everything right. Another thing I notice is how easy it is to romanticize connection when you're in that space. When you feel lonely, you start thinking about people differently. You start missing people you already know weren't right for you. You start reconsidering situations you already walked away from. You start telling yourself maybe it wasn't that bad. But that's not clarity. That's discomfort trying to pull you back into what's familiar. And I had to catch myself in that. Because just because something feels familiar does not mean it's aligned. I also had to learn the difference between being alone and being disconnected. Because you can be alone and feel at peace, and you can be surrounded by people and feel completely disconnected. And once I understood that, I stopped trying to fill my space with just anything. I stopped trying to talk to people just to avoid silence. I stopped trying to entertain connections that didn't feel real. Because empty connection will always make you feel lonelier than no connection at all. And that's something people don't always say, but it's true. Another layer to this is that when you're growing, your needs change. What you used to be okay with, you're not okay with anymore. What used to feel like enough doesn't feel like enough anymore. And that shift can feel isolating, because now you're not connecting the same way with the same people, and you haven't fully connected with new people yet. So you're in this middle space where you've outgrown one version of your life, but you're still building the next. And that middle space can feel quiet, it can feel slow, it can feel lonely, but it's also necessary, because that's where you learn yourself on a deeper level. That's where you become solid in who you are. That's where you stop depending on outside validation to feel whole. And that's a different level of growth. I also had to check myself on how I was showing up during this time, because there were moments where I would pull back so much that I wasn't even open to connection anymore. I was protecting my peace, but I was also closing myself off. And that's something to be aware of, because growth is not about shutting everyone out. It's about being intentional with who you let in. So I had to find balance. I had to stay open, but not available to everything. I had to stay receptive, but not overextend myself. And that takes awareness, that takes practice. But once you find that balance, things start to feel different. Not necessarily easier right away, but more clear, more grounded, more aligned. And that's when the loneliness starts to shift. Because now it's not coming from lack, it's coming from transition. And that's a completely different place to be. If you have ever felt like this, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear your experience too. And if this resonated with you, go ahead and give this video a like. And subscribe to my channel if you want more real conversations like this. Over here we talk about real things, things people feel but don't always say out loud. This is a space where you don't have to have everything figured out. I'm still learning and I'm still growing and figuring life out just like you. So if you want honest conversations and real perspective, you are welcome here. Until next time, be real with yourself. That's where everything starts. And wherever you are right now, it's okay. Just don't stay there.